We're in a really dense jungle with a game camera that's below the canopy.
We have never built anything this complicated in an isometric game.
The overall art direction for Diablo 4 was this dark Gothic vibe. We knew people had a lot of fond memories for D2. It was really about how do you bring back a little bit more of that seriousness, but with a new twist. The environment art team on Diablo 4 is comprised of lighters, level artists, prop and interactive artists, and dungeon artists. Environment artists focus mostly on the open world, and the prop interactive artists do anything that's interactive, all of the culture kits that you see, that sense of this place is lived in. And then of course you have lighting, which is the final pass that brings it all together. Heading into expansion was definitely a shift for us. When you think about Gothic, it's not necessarily just the architecture. It's also when you imagine what it was like to live during that time. And so for us, it's more about the tone. We had covered a lot of interesting biomes and locations in the base game. Going down into Nahantu is now this like wilderness, right? We don't have architecture in the same sense of like Western Gothic architecture. But thematically and tonally, there's still darkness. In Nahantu in the past, Mephisto had a major influence on it and had left its mark. And it is also the final resting place of Akarat. It's Akarat's presence that has drawn Neyrel down to Nahantu. Taking the lens of what we did on D4, we decided that we wanted to expand on our color palettes, expand on the depth of the image, and really play up, I think, stronger visual identity.
One of the art pillar is old master influence. So we're taking a very close look into painters like Frank Frazetta is the biggest one, trying to research his brush strokes, shape language, how he used colors and lightings. And then of course Diablo is all about nothing's a well in the world of Sanctuary. So everything has a little bit decayed, a little bit like destroyed, and a little bit rotten. And that has to stay true to like everything we make.
It feels heavy, dark, and challenging. But there's also these moments of light to contrast with the dark, so that when you go back, you feel that impact. And I think it also sort of shows you as a hero helping in these dark moments to bring light to the people who live in Sanctuary. When building out the expansion, we take our inspiration from places here on Earth, and we twist and add and tweak to make sure that it's its own flavor, it's its own interpretation for Sanctuary.
Open world, we definitely want to take a more realistic approach. That is sort of our focus, is how to make our environment believable and seamlessly transition from one to another. And on the fantasy side, we definitely want to push the shape language and also the mythical element of this zone. So it's not just a generic jungle. Part of Nahantu is actually just straight up not jungle. It's sort of like American desert, Grand Canyon kind of environment called a Taganze, which just adds another layer and variety to what Nahantu has to offer.
It's another experience where we pushed our color palette and the identity of the location into something that's really dramatic and dynamic. Going from concept to creation, when working on the expansion, concept team will do a key image that tries to capture the mood, and the environment artists take that and build it.
Very early on, my job is to interpolate the concept art and trying to make it realized in the engine and figure out, a lot of times trying to figure out what the limitations are and what can we do to work around it and still provide the similar feeling, if not surpass the feeling from the concept. Concept art, like they're just gorgeous. So that's what just inspired us to keep trying new things and keep like pushing the technology.
So as level art, we work very closely with level design and also with our asset creation team, like Sam, where they create a lot of the assets, and they work with the directors to kind of find an example of what they want the broader place to look like. So they build a small sample space. And then I take that, and then I take what level design has already blocked out as far as the needs of gameplay. And then it's my job to kind of make that kit work in a real gameplay situation. So sometimes the kit is more focused on just making sure it looks good. So you have like beautiful, dense foliage, but for a player, they need to know where they can walk and where they can't walk. It can be something as simple as like a beaten path. The way that you kind of angle trees and things like this to kind of help communicate to the player where they can go and where they can't go.
The camera in Diablo 4 is a huge part of its identity. It could be considered a challenge. The camera is fixed from that very unique, action RPG Diablo angle. And so for us, we actually embraced that.
It was definitely very challenging for Nahantu just because we have never built anything this complicated. We have to figure out how giant trees have to fit in on the screen in an isometric game. The amount of vegetation variety and the density of the foliage definitely raises a ton of challenge to our artistic side, plus the tech side as well.
We had to make sure that the player could see these elements at times. Giant trees, giant, branches coming off, vines hanging down. But we also need to make sure that we're not blocking the player's view of the gameplay space. With that, we basically had to think about getting stuff out of people's way. We have a lot of fading systems in place to make sure that the giant trees don't block the gameplay space. But we also had to figure out how to not fade too soon and too much, because we fade everything away, there's no story left on the screen for the players to really know what's going on. Pretty much the primary kind of necessity when we're building is that we have to make sure it's clear for the player. We're in a jungle, we're under a really dense canopy. So the challenge was really how to sell that story, but with a game camera that's below the canopy, looking down at the ground. And so the lighting team had to really come in and create more custom lighting for the jungle in order to sell that feeling that we wanted to sell, where it's very, very dark, but then you have those beams of light shining in and kind of illuminating parts of the ground.
We had a much better lighting system this time around to having those very gorgeous spotlight in the jungle. We also have a much better shadow system this time, and we can render way more foliage on the screen, and all that sort of just adds up to the result we get.
Keep the play space in mind to make sure it's readable, that the players know where to go. But off of the playable space is all this opportunity for us to really push the strong thematics of the location.
There's a lot of environments, obviously, that will support the campaign, and so they have a very straightforward story being told with them. But a lot of them, we just want to make sure that when you get there as a player and you look at it, you know roughly what's going on. It's a lot of almost passive storytelling.
I think Restless Canopy is probably my favorite, which is the vegetation and trees just keep growing and they never stop. We married the idea of a realistic jungle, and we reference a lot from Frank Frazetta for that zone. And the deep shadows and the softness of the dapple lights, I think it's just the most gorgeous place in Nahantu.
Field of Giants. It's a very unique environment, but it's also just the kind of environmental storytelling that we were able to kind of play with there, with these giant demon corpses that are they fell a long time ago, but their bodies are just so toxic and almost eternal, very much like nuclear waste or something, where it just kind of burns through the terrain. You have these people mining the bodies of these giants, and so you have these, where you can dig down deep into bits of their bodies to get what you need. Scaffolding, we have pulley systems, for pulling out the waste. We have run-over carts to show that they've been collecting it.
There's multiple sections or zones. We're not concept, and we just did our own thing, and we think this is cool. Example will be Skittering Earth. We have a centipede, which is one of the spirit-born. And we took that just what if you have a jungle, a section of a jungle just been devoured by a centipede, and that's Skittering Earth, and we just made that from scratch. So yeah, I think it's highly collaborative, but at the same time, we respect each other's creative freedom.
The environment art team is full of a lot of great talent, and they inspire each other and they inspire me every day.
What you can achieve with game art nowadays is very satisfying. The worlds that people create in games are just the top notch. There's not very many places that are more kind of built out than a game world. And so just having that opportunity to help bring a large world to life and to tell a lot of little stories, it's a pretty awesome thing.